Okay.
All right. Hi, everybody. It's so great to see you all today. It looks like we have just a couple more people in the waiting room and joining, so I'll give it just a second here. And we'll go ahead and get started. All right, I think we should be good. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today for our session. My name is Chelsea Kimura, and I'm a training and technical specialist with the Northwest ATTC, and I'm here to support the session today. My colleague Lindsay Worth is also on the session today, so please feel free to message me or Lindsay if you do run into any technical issues during the session. I also want to note that this session is being recorded and the recording will be available on our website in just a few short weeks for you to view and share with others. And just a quick friendly reminder for you all, you will be eligible to receive a certificate of completion for today's session. To meet our credentialing requirements, though, you'll need to stay with us for the whole session today, so do keep that in mind. I'm very excited to introduce our presenter for today in just a moment, but before I do that, I would like to open our session in a good way by sharing a land acknowledgement with you all. And Paul, can we go to the next slide, please? Perfect, thank you. Our work intends to reach the addiction workforce in HHS Region 10. So this includes Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. The region rests on the ancestral homelands of Indigenous peoples who have lived on these lands since time immemorial. So please join us in support of efforts to affirm tribal sovereignty and in displaying respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors. We're all coming from different areas of the Northwest or the country today, and I reside on the original homelands of the Siletz, the Grand Ronde, Umatilla, and Walla Walla tribes. I encourage you to look up which traditional homelands you reside on and share that in the chat if you're able. And I do have a link that I'm going to try and share with you all here so that you can do that. Let me make sure I can pull up our chat. All right. So try and access this link if you can, and go ahead and share in the chat which homelands you might reside on. All right, can we go to the next slide, please, Paul?
Of course.
Thank you. So
You're
most of
welcome.
you are probably familiar with the ATTC network, but for those of you who are not, this is a map of our network. We are a national network. The network includes 10 US-based centers and a network coordinating office. Our team works out of the Northwest ATTC, like I mentioned, so we serve organizations and communities that are located in Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. We are grant funded by SAMHSA, and through our work, we're able to provide educational and consultative services that promote the adoption and implementation of treatment and recovery practices. Next slide, please, Paul.
Mm-hmm. Is it
Awesome.
there?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, it showed up. Thank you. I think it just
Yeah.
took my computer a second.
Okay.
So we do have a quick survey for you all. This is a pre-survey, and we will have a quick post-survey at the end of the session. You can use that QR code there, or I'm also including the link in the chat for you. It should take you just a minute to complete that survey, and then we can go ahead and move on. So maybe just 30 seconds here, Paul, and then we can go to the next slide.
Of course. Of course. I happen to have my trusty watch available, so
Perfect.
I'll know when 30 seconds has
Perfect
actually
timing.
transpired. Yeah. 15 seconds.
So precise. I love that.
30 seconds.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. All right. And with that, I'd love to finally introduce Paul. I've been saying his name this whole time. Paul Warren is a research project director at the New York State Psychiatric Institute and a senior staff trainer and curriculum writer at the Northeast and Caribbean Addiction Technology Transfer Center. In 2017, he co-developed the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene's Training and Practice Implementation Institute. Paul began his social services career providing direct services to people living with HIV and AIDS from 1991 to 2003 and served as a clinical supervisor. Paul is a graduate of Hunter College School of Social Work and specializes in group work and is a member of the Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers, or MINT, which is how he came to be in the session with us today. So we're excited to have you, Paul, and just excited to learn from you today. Thank you so much for being here. And I'll
Thank you
pass
so
it over
much.
to you.
Yes, thank you so much, and thank you to Lindsay as well for the opportunity to be here. And I'm going to just take a moment to stop sharing my screen because I'd love to see people's faces. Wonderful to see your faces. And I wanted to thank you all for making the time to join this learning community conversation. And my hope is that this opportunity for us to be together will be an opportunity for us to actually engage in a dialogue about this particular topic. And again, we're focusing on the evidence-based practice of motivational interviewing. And I'll remind you of the title, which is "The Practice of Motivational Interviewing is Not for Every Conversation." And I'm wondering if anybody has any thoughts or reactions that you might want to share with the learning community about that particular title. And there are 82 of us in the learning community currently, maybe 83, because I think Deborah is about to join us. So anybody have any thoughts about that title? The practice of motivational interviewing is not for every conversation. Christy writes in the chat, many MI trainers think it is. Okay. Well, we'll see if we're on the same page about that. What other folks, any other comments? And you can unmute or you can put it in the chat. And I'm looking at the chat. Yeah, go ahead, Cordelia. And then we'll go to Joel as well.
And sort of appreciating how the spirit of MI, I think, is more applicable to many conversations than actual MI itself. Right?
Yes. Yes. And Cordelia, thank you so much for putting that on the table so early in this conversation, because there is a relationship between the spirit of motivational interviewing, or an MI consistent approach, and the practice of motivational interviewing, and yet they are distinct. Joel, the floor is yours. Go right ahead.
I would just say, like, one thing we use MI is if there's if the person is ambivalent about some sort of change. So if we know that, and the person has made it quite clear that there's nothing to change here, they don't want that, then like they wouldn't be an appropriate.
Yes. Yes. And Joel's point is very well taken. The fact that if the person's not considering a particular behavioral change, we can't really practice motivational interviewing in that particular moment. But to Cordelia's point, we still could use an MI consistent or an MI spirited approach. So keeping that in mind. Any other thoughts? And I think there are 3 more people in the waiting room. So I'm wondering if we can let them, Lindsay, you'll let them in. Fantastic. So Steven writes, a number of people have put things in the chat. So let's take a look at the chat. And I want to encourage anybody who's put something in the chat, if you also want to unmute and comment on it, please do. And Stephen, I'm going to start with you because yours is the last one in the, some conversations don't have to be advanced beyond the dialogue going on. Absolutely. Karen adds, can see you, but I do not have a personal code. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but perhaps Lindsay or Chelsea can respond to you. Lindsay's giving me the thumbs up. MI for conversations about behavior change, but spirit of MI can be used in any conversation. Stephanie, I'm reading what you wrote. I'm wondering, and you've got two hearts there. I'm wondering if you'd be willing or able to unmute and maybe elaborate on that. And that's Stephanie B. Are you able to unmute? Would you like to? Could you?
Sure,
Yeah, go ahead,
I
Stephanie.
can unmute. I just think the spirit of MI is something that, partnership, acceptance, empowerment, compassion. I think I'm getting that one right. Can be used, really in any space, in any conversations we have.
Okay.
That's something we can bring forward. However, when it comes to the full MI recipe, it kind of really just has to be about behavior change. Like you're not gonna be evoking change talk if there isn't a potential behavior change that you guys are talking about?
Yeah, and Stephanie, you're making such a critical point, because consider, folks, in order to evoke change talk, you're evoking change talk about a specific behavioral change goal. It's not just general change talk. So let me ask, I want to just throw out a couple of true or false questions, and trust your gut on this. Don't worry about being right or wrong. Just trust your gut. And I want to get a sense of, what people's thoughts are about this. Now, I'm also seeing that my colleague, Kate Speck, is here, and she wrote in the chat, MI is a special approach that requires technical and relational elements. Okay, so technical and relational elements. And Kate, before I ask my first true or false question, I'm wondering if you would be willing, if you feel comfortable unmuting, and if you'd like to elaborate on that at all.
Thanks a bunch, Paul. And I do want to elaborate on it always, because I really think so many people try to simplify motivational interviewing in a way that takes away from the spirit. And so, it's kind of like people say, oh yeah, I was trained in motivational interviewing and I know OARS. So they'll concentrate on, the aspects that we talk about, how to have a conversation without
Right.
engaging in the relational, the relational piece. Or they'll kind of hang on to all the relational stuff and forget all the stuff that's related to the technical aspects that we know are evidence-based.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Kate. And as you were talking, I don't know if you noticed this, but Cordelia, you were nodding your head. And my sense is that you were nodding your head because you agreed with Kate about the relational aspect of it as well. Yeah, go ahead. Please go ahead.
Be all formal here. Okay. One of the things that really comes to my mind, and I'm trying to sort of catch confirmation bias in here as well, is that I do a lot of work with family members who have a loved one that's struggling with addictive behaviors. And part of the work that we do is try to teach them the skills that are within MI, but also the spirit, of course, that's there, and definitely not in a way that it's all motivational interviewing. We're just talking about the relational part and how do we show up for each other in a way that honors autonomy and has a collaborative approach and has compassion. And so part of the thing that's going in my mind is yes. And I start wanting to get really super technical about, okay, what is it that I need to help family members step into in this place about teaching them this? That's really, really specific to my work. I don't want to hijack this 88% thing, but that's what I'm really super excited about here is taking this work and then also applying it to, and how do I teach this with families who are struggling and wanting to do this with their loved ones?
Excellent. So, and thank you for adding that. And thank you for adding what you're excited about and what you want to get out of this, what you'd like to take away from it. So Kate sets up the table beautifully. Thank you, Kate. Your check is in the mail. Kate sets up the table for me to ask this true or false question. And again, I'm going to ask you to just whatever what your gut tells you. The question is this: if a provider or if somebody who's engaging, quote unquote, in a helping conversation uses an open-ended question, offers an affirmation, reflects what the person is saying, or summarizes what they say, they are practicing motivational interviewing. Is that true or false? And you can just type T or F in the chat. I love it. Somebody wrote, nope. I love that. Okay. Now, yeah, and I saw somebody also write true and false, because it depends. And I'll go back to what Joel said earlier, because if that person has a behavior change that they're considering, and they're ambivalent about that behavior change, which is a little different than what Joel originally put on the table. But if they actually are ambivalent about that behavior change, then they could be practicing motivational interviewing. If there is no behavioral change goal, and there's no ambivalence because there's no behavioral change goal about that, there may be ambivalence about other things, they would not necessarily be practicing motivational interviewing. And I don't know if you've had this experience. And if you have, you can write the letter M in the chat. If you've had this experience, write the letter M. And if you haven't had the experience, write the letter N. But I've had the experience where people will vehemently say, well, I haven't said it yet, Marla. So let me say what I'm going to say yet. And then you can decide if you've had the experience or if you haven't had it. Which is that people will vehemently say, I practice motivational interviewing. I ask open-ended questions. I do affirmations, reflections, and summaries. So therefore, I am practicing motivational interviewing. Have any of you ever heard that or had that experience? Okay, so Ursula is giving me a solid, yes, I have. Yeah, Ursula, I don't know if you can unmute, but if you can, would you like to say anything about that?
Yeah, I find that I hear it quite a lot. And from actually what I know about that person and how they practice, it seems to me that they frequently practice CBT or just person-centered therapy, but they label it MI.
Yeah. And my hope is that what we will, oh, go ahead, Joel, you want to add something? Please go ahead.
Oh no, like whenever I do trainings, that's especially I think with, and this is completely anecdotal, like, but I've noticed especially master levels, QMHPs, or especially like, oh yeah, that's I use MI all the time. You like, it's like a something that just to throw in there, like if like there's nothing else comes to mind or something like, and so it's always interesting, like after we do a 20-minute session and then code it for them and to find out whether how proficient they are or not. It really is eye-opening for them to see.
Yes. And I imagine, Joel, what they're seeing, and please correct me if I'm making the incorrect assumption, but what they're seeing relates to what Ursula is saying, in the sense that they're realizing when we try and validate what you're doing, we're actually finding out you're not practicing motivational interviewing. You may be very skillfully communicating using open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries, and technically you are not practicing MI. Is that kind of what they find out?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it reminds me of what I forget who said it earlier, is like that a lot of people oversimplify MI. So if they do an open-ended question or if they do a summary, they're like, they've been 100% MI. Like so.
Yeah. And Kate said that actually. And again, one of the things that I hope that people will really take away from our conversation is being very clear about the distinction between the two and helping people to understand, hey, it's great that you're using these core communication skills. Bill Miller, whom I think spoke last time, maybe some of you were together, Bill Miller and Stephen Rolnick did not invent the open-ended question, nor the affirmation, reflection, or the summary. They did come up with a really great acronym, though, OARS. Everybody knows that. But Joel, to your point and to Kate's point, there's a real oversimplification about something that is actually quite nuanced. And I chose the word nuanced as opposed to complex, because it really is nuanced in a lot of ways. So my hope is that what we talk about will help even further distinguish that and further clarify that. Because, well, let me ask you this, and then I'm going to go to the slides, but let me ask this and see if anybody wants to respond to this. What could you see or identify as the benefit of knowing when you are actually practicing motivational interviewing? And Christy, you will receive a copy of the slides. Absolutely. Yeah, and you're free to use them in any way that supports your work or that you want to. So what do you imagine could be the potential benefits of people clearly understanding when they are actually practicing motivational interviewing and when they are engaging with the person in an MI consistent, MI spirited way. What do you see as any benefits that could potentially come out of them knowing that distinction? Okay, so progress for the client. And again, if anybody wants to unmute, feel free. But Catherine, thank you. Progress for the client. Anything else? Any other benefits that you potentially see? And that's open to everybody.
You can see if it's kind of evidence that MI is effective for that client in that situation.
Yes, they could potentially get evidence because they're actually applying the practice that can be validated and coded, and then they have evidence. Anything else? Buy-in from the client. The professional does not to work. Kate, I'm not quite understanding what you wrote there. Oh, the professional.
Sorry. Yeah, the professional doesn't have to work so hard. I can't type very fast.
Well, you think faster than you type.
Yeah.
Discretion. Oh, there are a couple of things coming in. Let me just make sure. Discretion, being able to monitor any spiritual apprehension. Okay, thank you, Tanya. Intentionally around what I am using when and why. Cordelia put this in. I will pay attention to different things depending on what I am trying to do or offer the client. And you know, Cordelia, there's a word I'm thinking of associated with what you wrote. And actually, it's in what you wrote. And I'm wondering if anybody looking at the chat knows the word that is really rising first and foremost to me out of what Cordelia wrote in the chat. Ursula also adds the session might be more focused. Absolutely. But any thoughts about what it is that what Cordelia wrote in the chat? Yes, that is exactly it. The intentionality of it. Because if you know you're doing one thing, you can intentionally put your energy there. If you know you're doing the other thing, in addition to the MI consistent, MI spirited approach, you can intentionally do that. And before I show you the slides, I want to underline something that Kate said, because this can help people to understand this distinction. The practice of motivational interviewing is the combination I have in the slide here, the fusion of the relational and the technical, being intentionally fused with a particular goal in mind. And that's why it's very nuanced. And now I will use the word complex, because it's keeping a number of plates spinning simultaneously while making, hopefully, an elegant and seamless bringing in the technical elements of it so that you can actually practice MI. Having said that, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to ask you all to please indulge me. When I share my screen, would you please, a number of you, please just type the letter Y in the chat that you can actually see my slide. And if some of you would also be gracious enough to, Mary, Elizabeth, I haven't shown it yet, so don't jump ahead. But I'm wondering also if a couple of you would just unmute and say, yes, I can see the slide. That would be very helpful. I'm going to attempt to share it right now. All right. There we go. Again, you can type Y in the chat, or you can unmute and let me know if you can actually see it.
I can see it.
Can see it.
Thank you. Thank you. My anxiety has just dissipated. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So just a couple of things to keep in mind. The goals of this talk really are twofold, that this being able to explore the differences between an MI consistent and MI spirited approach, and also, and again, I'm thinking of what Cordelia wrote in the chat about when we move to intentionally practicing motivational interviewing. And also the fact that if folks can, in a very practical, user-friendly way, understand this distinction, as Kate said earlier, and Kate, I love the way you put that, they don't have to be trying to force a square peg into a round hole. Like, oh, that conversation didn't really go so well because I didn't get to practice motivational interviewing, or the person wouldn't, well, maybe it wasn't called for. Maybe what was called for was a greater focus on the task of engagement and using an MI consistent, MI spirited approach with the engagement. We have a couple of learning objectives. Again, I'll let you read these on your own. But again, being able to be very clear that we can all very clearly and simply define an MI consistent spirited approach. And one of our colleagues already said it by using the acronym PACE: Partnership, Acceptance, Compassion, and Empowerment. And empowerment is a fairly recent revision. I don't know if Dr. Miller talked about that, but in his and Stephen Rolnick's 4th edition of motivational interviewing, helping people change and grow, the E in MI spirited, MI consistent approach used to be evocation, and they changed it to empowerment. And again, within the MI community, there's lots of thoughts, reactions, and feelings about that. I will just say, I'm making an I statement here. I will just say, I really appreciate the change to empowerment. And again, being very clear about the relationship between a behavioral change goal, and Joel, I'm thinking of you as I say this, ambivalence about that behavioral change goal, and the practice of motivational interviewing. And then being able to use OARS in an intentional way during the practice of motivational interviewing. And I do want to pause and say one thing about that. And I say this often, and some people may react to this. And I'm very curious if anybody has any reaction to this. You can put it in the chat. You can put it, you can unmute and say it. But I'm very curious if anybody has a reaction to this statement, which is, and I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen to say this because I want to see your faces when I say it, is there's no one right way to practice motivational interviewing. I'm going to repeat that. There's no one right way to practice motivational interviewing. Anybody? Jim is giving me some applause there. Jim, I don't know. And Nicole agrees. Ursula, you're nodding your head yes. Okay. Does Stephen is also giving me a thumbs up. Does anybody, Kristen also agrees. And Melinda agrees as well. Does anybody else, Anthony also? Anthony, I can see you. So I'm wondering, would you be willing to unmute and say why you're giving me a thumbs up in regard to that?
I'm just thinking back to like when we were, speaking for myself, when I was still in school, when we were learning about it, it felt so robotic for me in class. And I was always like, I had a hard time with that because I've always had a hard time with scripts in my life. I don't do well with like a very specific recipe for how a conversation goes. I have my own way of speaking and blah, blah, blah. I think the authenticity of you coming to the table with yourself carries more weight than me making sure I'm ticking like X, Y, and Z boxes to make sure that I hit the right, not that you don't try to hit those, but you have to do it in a way that makes sense and feels real for you, and follows the flow of the conversation and all that. And I think when we start getting a little too robotic about it, you'll lose that at some point. Maybe not everybody, but I certainly do. I try to, but yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. And the thing I want to underline in regard to what Anthony said, and I love that you said this, Anthony, because again, I don't know if folks have had this experience, and a couple of people have put things in the chat. We're going to look at those as well. But I don't know if folks have had this experience where MI practitioners or learners will say to you, Stephanie, just tell me what to say, and then I'll say it. I'll learn those lines, I'll learn that script, and then I'll just say it. And the thing that I often say to people is, well, you don't really know what you're going to say until you've heard what the other person is going to say. And I do want to add one other element, and this isn't in the slides, but I want to add this because, Anthony, you also mentioned authenticity. And one of the things that I love about motivational interviewing is it is a realm where your authenticity is celebrated. I'm going to repeat that. It is a realm where your authenticity is celebrated. Your ability to authentically engage that person is actually celebrated in the practice of motivational interviewing. And to that end, Anthony, you've inspired this. I'd like everybody to point to their eyes. Don't poke yourself in the eye, just point to your eyes. Good. Point to your ears. Touch your heart on the outside, and then touch your belly. Now we're all going to do it together again. Eyes, ears, heart, and belly. And Anthony, I really want to link that to what you said and to you, because ultimately when you're listening to that person across from you, what they're transmitting to you is going to register in one or two or three or all four of those areas. And you will form, if you're practicing motivational interviewing, and if you're engaging in an MI spirit, MI consistent approach, you will form what you're going to say based on what you've received on one of those four levels. And that, Anthony, is a beautiful connection to what you said about authenticity. And that's what we want to bring to the table in the practice of motivational interviewing. So thanks so much for saying that. Anybody else, any thoughts, any reactions to that statement that there's no one right way to practice motivational interviewing? Orlando, I see you're unmuted. Go right ahead.
Hi,
Was that an
Jack.
accident?
I was hoping you didn't see that.
I did.
So what immediately came to mind, I forgot the old Chinese proverb, but basically it covers the same areas. When you're actively listening, that you're taking all your senses into that. And depending upon how the other person says, that's all the elements. I was going to write it in here, but you caught me. Those are all the elements that are constantly used in that process.
Yep, absolutely. And you know, the other, and Maria, we're going to come right to you. Don't lose your thought, okay? We're going to come right to you. The other thing, Orlando, that you really inspire me to want to underline in terms of what you said as well, is how you experience on those four levels, the person talking to you is going to be different than the way I experience it, or the way Anthony experiences it, or the way Maria experiences it. And that means that there's no one right answer. It's us in the moment with that person. You want to say something else, Anthony? Go ahead. Orlando, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you sort of summed it all up, because that me as a clinician, not only am I, looking and reading and sensing all that they're saying, but I need to monitor this as well. So I've got two things going on at the same time, and knowing when and how is all dependent upon how that conversation engages in the moment. And I'll use that word. So
thank you. And that decidedly is not a script. It isn't. It just isn't. Maria, thanks for your patience. The floor is yours.
So when I started working with other people and helping them along and assisting them in life and things like that, I didn't even know what MI was. And I realized when I got to the training that I was already doing it just by helping people have their own voice in their own life. Just like making sure that their voice was being heard and I wasn't imprinting anything on them. And that happened in all kinds of different ways, even without knowing anything about the process of MI.
Yep. And Maria, what you just said, I think is so critical to understanding the relationship between the relational part of MI and the technical part. Because what feels very familiar to you, if I'm understanding what you're saying, is how to give people the opportunity to have their own voice. And that, my friends, is what I would underline MI spirited, MI consistent approach. That alone is a powerful tool. That is not the same thing as the practice of motivational interviewing. And again, you build on what you just mentioned, Maria. So yeah, go ahead, Joel. Go right
I
ahead.
was just gonna say, like, I think, Maria, you're a much better person than I was, because I had grad school like 10, 11 years ago when I first heard about it. I was thinking, wow, this is a great way to get somebody to do what I want them to do, without them even knowing it. And so I thought it was like, I was really fascinated with like all this different ways you could get somebody, like by asking questions, and like, and I, like, obviously, since, going through the process, that's not the 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 outcome and the attention. But it's just funny. It's like, you're a much better person than I would, Maria.
Well, I'll tell you, Joel, you're not alone in that assumption, and you've just provided a wonderful segue into what I wanted to share with you from the slide. So I'm going to just take a moment and touch on something that I wanted to share with you in regard to the slide. And Joel, the other thing that I want to underline in terms of what you said is, from what you said, you're clearly in an ongoing relationship or journey with the practice of motivational interviewing. Some people stop at, oh, this is a really great way for me to get somebody to do what I want them to do. And what we want to help people to understand is, of course, first and foremost, that's not what it is. And we want to help them to understand what Maria was talking about, that relational element. And then if they decide to go forward and use the evidence-based practice, then they can build in the technical aspect of it, which is when we're actually practicing motivational interviewing for a very particular reason. So I'm going to share my screen and we will go forward a little bit. And I'm going to have faith and confidence that you can see the screen now. So again, keeping in mind that an MI consistent, MI spirited approach is hopefully, and Maria, I'm thinking of you as I say this because you described it so beautifully, far more beautifully than my slide does, but ultimately, folks, it's the way you are. It's the authenticity you want to bring to the moment. And it's defined in a very particular way when we're thinking about MI consistency. And what I would throw out for all of us to consider is we can think of an MI consistent spirited approach as the relational foundation. And hopefully, and I'm going to say it here, I think I repeat it later, but I want to say it here because it was already mentioned. Hopefully, we are bringing this relational foundation in an intentional way to every conversation that we're having. And again, the way we are with that person. So keeping in mind that an MI consistent spirited approach is sometimes defined as a mindset or a heart set or an orientation. It is, and I'm using the I word there, it is an intentional way of being, and again, in a conversation with another person or persons. And as I said, it's defined. So we can be very clear what we mean. It's not general, it's not new agey. We're talking about a way of being with somebody that has clear parameters laid out for us, and we're going to review those in a moment. It's also known as MI spirit alone, but again, keep in mind that being an MI spirit is using an MI consistent approach. I would throw out, and if you agree with this, you can type an A in the chat. If you think it's an overstatement, type an O. We're in a learning community, and I'm asking you for your real thoughts and reactions to this. I would throw out that an MI consistent, MI spirited approach is a powerful way to enhance engagement and build rapport. And I'm going to check the chat just to see if anybody has, if anybody agrees with that. Okay, so it looks like a few people agree with it. Good. And if you think it's an overstatement, don't hesitate. Okay, and Violetta says absolutely with an exclamation point. Okay, excellent. I would also say that we can think of an MI consistent, MI spirited approach is that it's also present and it's essential when we are also practicing motivational interviewing. It's that relational foundationship that we can then bring into the conversation when the circumstances are appropriate, the practice of motivational interviewing. And my whole sort of point of this conversation, it's not, in and of itself, it is not the practice of MI. And an MI spirited consistent approach, it can be learned through practice, reflection, and receipt of MI informed feedback. You can actually learn how to be MI consistent, MI spirited. And I'm just quickly checking the chat. I saw that a couple of other things came in. Necessary but not sufficient. Absolutely, Cordelia. Absolutely. Necessary, it's got to be there. It's not sufficient because spirit, consistent approach alone will not create the opportunity to explore ambivalence about a particular behavioral change goal, nor will it identify intrinsic motivation and strengthen that motivation, or extrinsic motivation. It can be any, but the person's actual motivations. And again, we can remember it by PACE, this acronym partnership. These 4 components overlap and they kind of lay out the parameters of how we want to be. Acceptance, remember, there are those 4 A's. We want to emphasize the person's autonomy. We want to interact with that person as having absolute worth, no matter what they've done, no matter what they're doing. We also want to bring to it affirming their particular strengths and efforts, and this is all part of acceptance. And we also want to seek to understand them with accurate empathy and the ability to accurately, as best we can, reflect back to them what it is they're communicating to us. And you'll notice with acceptance, folks, nowhere does it say it condones behaviors. It doesn't say that. And I think that there can be misunderstanding about what acceptance actually means. Also, we want to bring compassion and empathy to the interaction, really being attuned to the person's affective realms as well. And empowerment, which is the revision from the 3rd edition, empowerment is really helping that person, providing the person with the opportunity to exercise their autonomy about what they will or won't do next, about what they want to focus on, where they get to drive their bus. We're with them, we're engaged in a partnership with them. Ultimately, they are driving. We are guiding when we're practicing motivational interviewing, and they are driving. Also, keeping in mind that the practice of motivational interviewing is about helping people to explore that ambivalence about a specific behavioral change goal, finding and strengthening that person's motivations. And again, we may help them bring their motivations out on the table. And when those motivations, their motivations are on the table, part of the practice of MI is doing something with their motivations that actually strengthen their motivations and cause their motivations to multiply or grow. And the way I frame this is that it's the relational and technical fusion. We've got that MI consistent approach the way we are. That's the relational foundation. When the opportunity arises and we can practice motivational interviewing, we are then fusing the relational with the technical. And we know that now is the moment to actually do this. Now, I'm going to pause for just a minute because I want to take a moment and invite any thoughts, any comments, any reactions to what we've covered so far. Is there anything that anybody would like to say or add in regard to where we are at this particular point? You can put it in the chat or you can unmute. Again, comment, question, anything else you want to put on the table. Cordelia says, this is phenomenal. Thank you, Cordelia. Thank you. So any other thoughts, reactions, anything that you want to underline in terms of what we're talking about thus far? And I'll pause for just a moment to see if anybody has anything they want to add. And I failed to mention this in the beginning. I want to underline, folks, if during the course of this conversation, at any moment that you want to say something, you want to add something, you want to add information, share a reaction or a question, don't hesitate to interrupt me. Feel free to just unmute and say, hey, I'd like to add this, or I'd like to react to this. So please don't hesitate to do that. I welcome interruption. And I don't think I said that at the beginning. Okay, so Ashley says this is real great. And I think you mean real. I'm not positive, Ashley, I don't want to assume, but you'll let me know. Christy says this aligns with Miller's presentation last week. Thank goodness. Thank goodness, Christy. And Catherine Ann says, it sometimes takes a long time for a client to reveal their true motivations. Catherine, I don't know if you're able to unmute, but if you are and you're willing, would you be willing to say a little bit about that? Because I couldn't agree with you more, and I will throw out, just for consideration, that's where a consistent MI-spirited, MI approach can be really, really beneficial. Go ahead, Catherine, please.
Just that sometimes, no matter how skillful we are, they're not giving it to you until you establish. And sometimes I just had a client, it's been over a year, that they finally share with me what's really going on under the hood. Yeah. So there's that too, like, there's our proficiency, and then there's the relational part, which may be way behind that, is where that's coming from. Yeah. We're going to go to Kara in just a minute. I do want to underline, though, you really remind me of how, many of the folks that we have the privilege or the honor to provide care and services to are people who have experienced historical trauma, intergenerational trauma, currently experiencing trauma. And of course, we have to be aware of the fact that this person is going to grow to trust us or feel safe with us in the time that they're going to do that. And Joel, I'm thinking of you as I say this, MI is not a way to force them to divulge something. We can be intentional about how we are with the person and see where their engagement goes. And then if the opportunity arises to practice motivational interviewing, we have the relational foundation to do that. And Catherine, I love the fact that you said in your client situation, it took a year for this person to get to where they are. One of the things that I also love to say is if you have 3 minutes with somebody, you can actually embody an MI consistent, MI spirited approach, and that person may feel comfortable talking about what they're considering changing or their motivations. And Catherine, to your point, it depends on the person. It depends on the situation. So thank you for putting that on the table. Cara, the floor is yours.
It really is more of a question, and I think it ties in with something that Catherine was just saying, and also you mentioned acceptance. Like, what does that really mean? And does acceptance, of course, accepting where people are in that moment as part of what we all do and our goal or our goal. But one thing I'm struggling with, and I'm fairly new, relatively new to all of this, is one thing I'm struggling with is if I suspect that there is a story that a person that I've been working with for a while is telling that really means something else. It's like this story gets repeated, but it really means what's really happening is that's a code for I've relapsed and I've used again. And this is kind of like gnawing at me, and I don't address it. But is it not showing acceptance if I come right out and say that, you know what, this is something that I suspect? Will it bring us closer together if I do that? Will it build trust, and will it show that I accept them no matter where they are, or will that create a rupture in the therapeutic relationship? And maybe this is off the topic, but it's part of that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Cara, I don't think it's at all off the topic, and I'll tell you why. Because remember, I invited you to point to your eyes, ears, heart, and gut. We may have hunches or get information from the person. And again, I love the way you put it. You said that, the person is telling this story and your gut is telling you that's code for this.
Mhm.
And, code for this means that somewhere in your attunement, you're picking up something different. And I'll tell you folks, one of the things that I love about motivational interviewing, and I think you can probably tell how I feel about MI. One of the things, and if you can't, I'm going to try and be a little more obvious. One of the things that I love about motivational interviewing is that we can be curious in an empathic way. And if our gut is telling us something, we can, in a very respectful, very empathic, very supportive way.
That's what I say. It's not sometimes what you say, it's how you say it a lot of
Yes,
the times.
Joel.
And
Yes.
a lot of the clients, like, ask, present, and ask, hey,
Yeah.
ask them, hey, I observed something. Can I share that with you? Then like they say yes. Or if they say no, of course, then you're like, okay, well then I won't share it. But usually they'll say yes, and then you can share that with them, and like, your concern, and then just ask them like, what do you think about that? Am I on the mark? So
Am I off?
yeah, you're curious. You're not just making an accusation. You're not like you're inviting them to kind of like explain your observation that you shared with them.
Yeah. And they may at any moment say, no, that's absolutely inaccurate. And again, if that's what they say, even if your gut is telling you something else, be with them where they are at that moment, because they may then say, if you accept it, they may then say, well, actually, I want to go back a minute and I want to talk about what you said. And Joel just gave a beautiful example of the ask, offer, ask strategy by inviting permission. I have some feedback, or I have this hunch. I'm wondering if you'd be open to me sharing it with you. I was also thinking when you gave the example that, I might ask an open-ended question of something to the effect of, I'm wondering, where are substances in your life right now? In a non-judgmental, open, and accepting kind of way. Cara, any thought, any reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's fair. I was just having a conversation with one of my coworkers before this, and
Yeah.
she said something similar. She has much more experience than I do. And I certainly do ask, openly, where you are. But I think that a lot of people, particularly the demographic of people that I work with,
Yeah.
learn how to, like many of us do, say what they think you want to hear, right? And it's a survival mechanism that has been really, really, really important for them. And it's a hard one to let go of. And I guess, just saying it, just a good reminder that you all have given me and my coworker of like how to phrase it, and just out of curiosity and compassion and love. This is what's kind of nagging at me, and I just want to see if you can hear this. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's good validation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for putting it on the table. A couple of things came in the chat. Let's take a look at those together. Cordelia writes, or Catherine writes first, it sometimes takes a long time for a client to reveal their true motivation. And Catherine, thanks for elaborating on that. Cordelia adds, and sometimes they may not really know for themselves, but the relational part allows for the safety of awareness and exploration. So beautifully and clearly stated, Cordelia. Thank you. Kristen writes, pointing out differences between goals and behaviors is part of MI, or am I wrong? No, Kristen, and that's actually called planting seeds, formerly known as developing discrepancy, but helping people to kind of see these two things together and what their relationship is. Orlando writes, ask with kindness is another way to be direct. Shauna writes, it helps to develop discrepancies for the client by providing feedback to them about what I am seeing or hearing. Rapport does matter, absolutely. And I'll go back to what Joel said, how you say it really matters, because we communicate empathy through our verbal and nonverbal communication. And Karen says, I love the word curious used with enough silence. Yeah, absolutely. And Kristen writes, can you please change your background? It's extremely distracting with the flashing lights and potential seizure invoking. Kristen, are you talking about my background? And if you are, please let me know, because maybe there's a way I could change it. I'm not aware of that. Oh, okay. Yep. Okay. Thank you, Cordelia. Karen writes, I love the word curious. Yeah, yeah. And I'll throw something out to you that I don't know if Dr. Miller mentioned this. I was in a conversation once with Dr. Rolnick and several of our colleagues, and Dr. Rolnick shared with us this acronym. This is not in the slides either, but I want to share it with you. Dr. Rolnick shared this acronym with us. And Lindsay, I'm wondering if you're familiar with this acronym. It's called the 6 C's. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not. I can't wait to hear.
Okay. Well, I throw it out there because it can be a really wonderful way to get into what can be an MI-spirited, MI-consistent approach. And what Dr. Rolnick said is that the first C is let go of the clutter that's in your head so you can be present. He also says let go of being clever in terms of thinking you have to come up with something clever to say. He also added the third C is let go of control. And what he invites us to consider is to be in the conversation, attuned to our own personal calmness. How calm are we? Can we be curious as well? And can we bring compassion to the moment? So the first 3 are the things we want to try and let go of. And the 6 are the final 3 are the ones we want to try and bring to the moment. Clutter, clever, control, calm, curious, and let me just see the last thing you wrote there, Orlando. Calm, curious, and compassion. That's it. That's it. And again, I find that very helpful sometimes if I'm starting to feel anxious or if I'm starting to feel my fixing reflex come into play, that I can just say 6 C's and go through them in my head. So I wanted to share that with you as well. I love it too, Lindsay. I thought it was so generous that he shared that with us. And actually, he shared it with us before the 4th edition of the book. And he said, I might put that in the 4th edition. I don't think he did though, but oh well. I don't think it is. Sadly, I don't think it is. All right. So folks, I'm going to share my screen again. And I'm aware that we are reaching the hour mark, and I do want to leave time for us to have, sort of more dialogue, more questions about this. So I'm going to walk through a little bit of the remainder of the content that I have with you, and then we can use the rest of the time exploring that further or bringing anything else you want to bring to the table. So I'm going to share my screen again. All right. So keeping in mind as we talk about this, that the practice of motivational interviewing, we know that it's a method of communication about behavior change and growth. It's evidence-based. In fact, Lindsay, you may know this in a more accurate accounting than I do, but I recall the last time Bill spoke in New Zealand that there were over 2,000 plus studies that have contributed to the evidence base of motivational interviewing. Also keeping in mind that MI is codable and it's verifiable. We can tell if somebody's actually doing MI or not doing MI. It can decrease ambivalence about a particular behavior change goal if the person has one, because they're safe to explore that. It can be a way to identify and strengthen motivations for behavior change. It can lead to planning about a behavior change goal. And it can also lead to taking steps toward a behavior change goal. And the practice of MI, the evidence shows that it can result in behavior change. And anyone can learn how to practice motivational interviewing who gets training on it, who reflects on what they do, who receives MI-informed feedback, because it is an ongoing process in order to really proficiently use this evidence-based practice. Now, it's probably pretty important to be equally clear that it's not a technique to get people to do what you believe is best for them. It's also not a method to get people to do what you want them to do. It's also not manipulation. It's not tricking the client or patient. I don't know about you, but I've had many people say to me, well, isn't MI really about just tricking the person into thinking that they came up with the answer? And I will say, no, it's not about that. It's also not you motivating the client or the patient. Remember, it can be a way of engaging in a conversation where we're just using what the person has given us and they're actually motivating themselves. It's also not you telling the client or patient what to do. It's directional. It's not directive. Directional, not directive. Okay. Oh, Lindsay, thank you for adding that in the chat. Is there anything you want to say about that? Do you want to take a moment and say?
It's just the list of MI controlled trials that Bill Miller keeps track of. This one's just slightly dated, but it's pretty, yeah, you're right. It's about 2,500 controlled trials at this point over the top.
Fantastic. Okay. So at least I remembered that correctly. Thank you. Thanks for putting it there in the chat. Also, keeping in mind that the practice of MI is not necessarily time intensive. I've had many people say to me, oh, I would practice MI, but you know, it just takes so long. Well, actually it doesn't, especially if you're well grounded in an MI consistent, MI spirited approach, which can then lead to rapport and engagement. And so it doesn't necessarily require a lot of time. It can, it depends on the person. And it's also not only to be done by clinicians, it's also not for every conversation. And that's, again, the essence of the point that I'm trying to make here. The practice of MI is not for every conversation. So keeping in mind the elements of the practice is that it's a client's, and again, these elements combined, the conditions within which we can practice. It's a client-centered conversation between two collaborative partners. It's a conversation that focuses on a specific behavior change that the person is ambivalent about. If the person's not ambivalent about it, don't practice MI. You don't need to. If they are ambivalent, it's an opportunity to practice motivational interviewing. And when we're practicing it, we are intentionally guiding the conversation to do two things. Thing one is to help that person explore their ambivalence about the change that they're considering, and to help that person identify the motivation or motivations that help them to consider this particular behavioral change. And I will add here, when we're practicing MI, in addition to drawing out that change talk from them, and Kate, I'm going to use a word that I use very often in our work together. To effectively practice MI, we have to be able to put to work the change talk that is set on the table. It's not enough. We're not getting the maximum benefit out of the practice if we, as the worker, do not employ their change talk. And I often call that leaving money on the table. I've listened to many audio recordings where naturally occurring change talk has happened, or the worker has very skillfully offered a reflection, an open-ended question, and more change talk has come, and then they move on to their next question. They don't do anything with that change talk. And what I want all of us to consider is part of the technical aspect of this practice is also doing something with the change talk that is there. And again, we can ask for elaboration about it. We can affirm any strengths or efforts that are part of it. We can reflect it, meaning we say it again, or we can include it in a summary. So remember that There's a relationship between an MI consistent spirited approach, the relational foundationship, and the practice of MI. Both of these are at your service. I'm also seeing that something came in the chat. I'm just going to quickly check it. And let me see if I can see it. Okay. And again, don't hesitate, folks, if you want to unmute, if there's something you want to say, don't hesitate to do that. So to practice MI or not to practice MI, that is our question. I wanted to make this little chart. And if you know what play I'm stealing that line from, it wasn't actually to practice MI, but it was something else. If you know the play that I'm stealing that line from, please write it in the chat. To practice MI or not to practice MI? That is our question. Let's see if somebody got it. So it's not only the ratio of change talk to sustained talk, but the employing of it. Yes, Cordelia. And Cordelia, you also have it. Yes, Orlando, it's Hamlet. But Cordelia, for extra credit, does anybody in our learning community know that the name Cordelia is in one of Shakespeare's plays? And if you know which play it is, type it in the chat. I think I know. I did have an opportunity to study Shakespeare for a while. So we practice MI. We start with an MI consistent approach, that relational foundationship. Let's see if somebody put it in the chat. Yes, Karen, it is to be or not to be. That is the question. And Jim, it's Susan. No, it is not. I don't think there's a Cordelia in A Midsummer Night's Dream, but there definitely is, Jim, in King Lear. Bingo. Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. So we of course are bringing that relational foundationship to the conversation. There's a behavioral change goal that the person feels ambivalent about. And we intentionally explore their ambivalence about the behavioral change goal, and we identify and strengthen their motivations related to the behavioral change goal. Not to practice MI. We still bring an MI consistent approach. There's no behavioral change goal. Then we don't have an opportunity to practice motivational interviewing. Now, I will add something here. If we are consistent with an MI consistent approach, an MI spirited approach, there may not be a behavioral change goal in that moment that the person is ambivalent about. It doesn't mean that one may not evolve or become apparent in a future conversation. So that's also one of the benefits of an MI consistent, MI spirited approach. It creates the opportunity for that person to identify a behavioral change goal that they're ambivalent about. Also, there is a behavioral change goal, and this is under not to practice MI, but there's no ambivalence about it. So what you can do there is you can simply move to helping to collaboratively develop a plan. You don't have to do anything else. Now, let me just quickly check the chat because I see a few things came in and they might not be King Lear. Oh, Lindsay says, I want a Shakespearean name. Absolutely. I'm going to think of which one yours maybe should be. Anthony writes, to leaving money on the table. While at times ethically dubious, the salesperson's implementation of MI can serve us here. Anyone who has been successful in sales knows when to stop talking. When we get enough change talk that gives us a place to start, we shouldn't just move on to the next open-ended question. Absolutely, Anthony. Or reflection arbitrarily, which is the absolute contrary to intentionality. The goal of the conversation has been met already. Save it for next time, or if they start reverting to sustained talk. Yes. Yes. Thank you, Anthony. And Anthony, I don't know if you want to unmute and say anything else about that. And if you do, by all means, I'll pause for a moment to see if you want to do that.
I don't know. Sometimes I'm a supervisor, so I'll get called in sometimes, like talk to a client, and I'll be helping out like the counselor who was maybe going over like a treatment recommendation or something like that. And one of the feedbacks that I got from somebody once was I was basically helping a person like get on board with the idea of inpatient, and they were really struggling to get there. Yep. And we got it at the end of the conversation. We got that person to kind of get ramped up and like, okay, I think this is a good idea. And the counselor was like, there was a point in there where you just stopped. You stopped like trying to convince him, or what? Like that's the words that he used. That's not what I was doing, but that's how he interpreted it.
Good. I'm glad to hear that that's not what you were doing.
Yeah. And I was like, well, he already said yes. What else am I gonna say? Let's start the plan then. Like there was no reason to like give him more. We got there already. So I don't know. I always try to keep that in mind. Like sometimes less is more. Like you just like, hey, we got like this is what we're trying to work on today. If we get there, great. If not, there'll be another session, or maybe we extend the session we're in. But there's no reason to like just keep going just for the sake of it, just to fill the time. Just get where you got, and then you start treatment planning it from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you're really raising, and I wish we had another, hour and a half, because and sadly we don't, but you're raising another really important point, which is, folks, when we attune and listen carefully to the language of ambivalence, when we're attuned and listening to that conversation, to Anthony's point, we will get a sense of that actually this person is ready to move to planning. And some of the hallmarks that can be seen there is that there's more change talk than there is sustained talk. Some of the other hallmarks are the person can simply say, these are some of the things I've been thinking about that I could do in regard to this. And again, to your point, Anthony, we do want to employ the change talk, and we want to be very clear about what's really happening in the moment. And is this person really ready to go to planning? And sometimes, the person just saying yes is a little bit different than saying, okay, so you've said yes to this. Tell me a little bit about, what you see as the benefit of actually taking this action. Because yes is not identifying necessarily the specific motivations. And those maybe came earlier, and maybe they were very clearly employed. I do want to underline, though, that there can be great benefit in employing that change talk in an intentional way that's right for the moment. And again, we have to, make our judgment about that in the moment. And there can be a tendency to prematurely move to planning when enough motivation actually hasn't been added up. I hear somebody's unmuted. Go ahead. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was saying I was thinking about how like don't put the cart in front of the horse. Like if you're not in preparation stage of change, don't start doing stuff that's good for that SOC. Like because then you're gonna lose the client. Like if they're still ambivalent, don't go too fast, I guess is the moral of the story there. There might be stuff to unturn,
Yeah, and it's interesting. I love the image that you used, don't put the cart before the horse, because really what we've done is we've put ourselves ahead of the client.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And we can course correct, folks. We can back up and say, oh, you know what? Let me back up a minute here, because I realized I've gone too far. And that's, it's not about perfection. It's about really trying to understand and be attuned to what's going on in the moment.
Yeah, we'll talk to people about that. Like, hey, if you ever get like a treatment plan that maybe just isn't working, double check. Maybe you made it when it was created. It was like, they maybe presented a little bit further down the road, or maybe they backpedaled since last time we talked to them, and just change it up, because it's not going to work if you can't do like an action like a treatment plan that's like meant for like someone who's like on board with recovery, relapse prevention. Let's go. It's like, wait, I'm not even sure I want to do this. Like, okay, we gotta let's go back to the drawing board. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Let's back up, and it's okay to back up, folks. It's perfectly okay. So we've touched on this already, but I just wanted to link these ideas of OARS, of course, are the tools we use. They're not exclusive to the evidence-based practice of motivational interviewing. They are the conversation sort of micro skills that can be used in any and every conversation. And with motivational interviewing, we want to use these core communication skills intentionally, because they are intentionally related to the practice that we are engaging in that moment. And let me give a concrete example. Somebody identifies a particular behavioral change goal that they are ambivalent about. We are going to want to use these tools as they relate to what the person is considering. So let's say the person is considering cutting down the amount of marijuana they smoke on a daily basis. If we were going to use an open-ended question, we might want to, and again, intentionally. So as you consider cutting down the amount of marijuana that you smoke on a daily basis, what do you see as sort of the benefits of that for yourself? And again, that's intentional, helping them to identify, and that's a very simple, very basic example. The larger point that I want you to consider and walk away with is how we can use these skills very intentionally, these tools very intentionally, to help guide toward the practice of motivational interviewing. And while we're practicing MI, we want to use these in a very intentional way. So a thought for us maybe to consider to just start off the little bit of time that we have left for conversation, and I'm just quickly checking the chat, guiding them to see the benefits versus consequences of their current situation, Christina says. And Faith says, I love these trainings. All the skills are so valuable. I couldn't agree with you more. Yes, all right. And Lindsay says, love that. The goal of the conversation has been met already. Yeah, so why tarry in a place where that's already been met? So I'd like to just throw out for you the idea of considering the benefits of using an MI consistent spirited approach for all conversations. And I'm going to put that out on the floor, the benefits of using an MI consistent spirited approach for all conversations. Anybody have any thoughts, reactions, comments, questions about that? Anybody willing to unmute and share their thoughts, reactions, comments about the idea of what do you see as potential benefits of employing in an intentional way partnership, acceptance, compassion, and empowerment in every conversation that you have?
Go ahead, Orlando. It brings to me almost immediately the intent of being trauma-informed and trauma-centered, like literally, like before it became, I'm going to use air quotes, before trauma-informed centered,
yes,
conversations was popular. That's what it brings to me almost immediately, right? I said earlier about you can be direct, but always use kindness. I'm even going to invoke, if I could use that word, the 12 steps, which, also has these elements embedded within the 12-step concept. So, that's what I sort of take home with me. And I really do appreciate that approach, because it helps the client, but also makes me a better person, if that makes any sense. There's got to be a little selfishness in here, but it makes me a better person moving forward.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much, Orlando. Anybody else? There are a lot of thoughts coming in the chat. Let me read a few of them. But again, I want to invite anybody who'd like to unmute. If there's anything you'd like to say in regard to that, please. Again, what you see is potential benefits of intentionally using, Matthew, I'm just reading yours because it's the last one in the chat. Helps with personal relationship conflicts. Yes. Lorraine writes, it's letting go of controlling the conversation and or trying to be the fixer. Yes, and you're getting some definite love and thumbs up in regard to that. And let's see. Carrie Ann says, what a wonderful way to help all people feel valued and heard in all conversations. Cara adds, using the spirit or way of being helps ensure that everyone feels deeply heard. And Cara, can I ask you a quick follow-up question in regard to that?
Sure.
Okay. So if that's our intention, if our intention is to create an environment where everyone feels deeply heard, what do you think the impact of that is on the person talking?
I think for me, a lot of the people that I work with have been marginalized people that are ignored and not heard and not even acknowledged, their existence or yeah. So, if you feel heard, you feel empowered, your voice matters and everything about you matters again. So
Yeah.
that's one thing in a nutshell. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to do a very simple reflection and simply say, the person gets the opportunity to feel that they matter.
They matter. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Ursula's nodding her head on that one.
Yeah.
And even applauding.
Mhm.
Ursula, do you want to say anything? Do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. I really love that, what you just said, Kara. Boundaries. I think boundaries are really difficult for humans in all social interactions, or most social interactions. So being MI spirited can really help with recognizing where you end and the other person begins while you're actually staying close and in psychological contact. So
yeah, you're not overwhelming or invading the person. You're in this parallel engagement, but you're not, and it's very much like what Orlando started us off with, the idea that there is a real alignment between trauma-informed care and an MI-consistent, MI-spirited approach. Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much, Ursula. Let's see, Pete says, hold on just a second. My chat window is not cooperating with me. Hold on a second. I want to read what Pete said. Pete says, hold on just a second. And Pete, help me out if you can unmute and you can just say it. That would be great. But I can try and read it from the chat window.
No,
too.
I can.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, it's you may have read or other people have too. It's the book about nonviolent communication. Forgive me about I don't remember the author, but reading other people's comments, that's what the pace reminds me about. Really like letting go of judgment, trying to get clarity on words and the use of words, understanding that there's culture too, a lot of times in our communication, and limited perspective. So if we can really I don't know, it's not easy, kind of like what Orlando said, there's a little bit of selfishness going on in every conversation and, like a clean slate if you can in listening, so.
Yeah. And Pete, you remind me that that's also where the curiosity can come in, because I can acknowledge that, I'm not the same person as Ursula. Therefore, if I really listen to her, I can find out about what's important to her, what the meaning is to her, as opposed to me making some sort of assumption about that, which is probably coming through my cultural lenses and is much more about me than attending. And that's one of the other things that I love about motivational interviewing is I get to see what's important to the other person as opposed to what I think is important. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much, Pete. Yeah. Orlando is applauding you, Pete. Mary Elizabeth writes, MI is intentional counseling in action. Every question, reflection, and silence is chosen with a purpose to evoke, affirm, strengthen a client's own motivation for change. Without intentionality, MI becomes just nice conversation. With intentionality, it becomes a powerful engine for change. Mary Elizabeth, thank you so much for typing that in the chat. And I love the fact that you kind of called out the practice of MI, and an MI consistent approach is much more than just a nice conversation. It has the power. And, Kara, I'm thinking of you when you talked about using an MI consistent approach is to help people to have a voice, to let them know that they matter. That makes a difference, folks. That helps people to go forward. That helps to grow hope, possibly, and it can also help to create trust. So we have about 4 more minutes remaining, if my watch is correct. And I'm just wondering if everybody wouldn't mind just taking a deep breath and just let it go. And I'll just say, again, I'm so honored and thankful that I had the opportunity to be in this learning community with all of you. And I'm wondering if there's anybody who would be willing to unmute. And just as a way of concluding, what's one thing that stands out to you about your experience of our being in this learning community together? And of course, there's no right or wrong. We're talking about your experience. So one thing that stands out to you about your experience of being in this learning community together. Lorraine says very interactive. Okay. Anybody? Oh, understood. Understood, Michelle. Thank you so much for this. The way you teach makes learning understandable. Oh, I'm glad of that, Ashley. Excellent. Yeah, and yeah, go ahead, Joel, please. Go ahead.
It reminded me how much I love MI, and get you excited about it. It kind of like actually brings your attention back to, because that's what I think we don't do this, day in, day out. And I think it's kind of just brings my attention back to like, oh, I'm going to see if I'm doing that, or I'm going to try to practice, improving this, going forward. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Catherine Ann wrote, improved clarity regarding implementing MI. Okay. Okay. Anybody else want to unmute? And just the one thing that stands out to you about your experience of our being in this learning community together? We have a couple of more minutes if anybody has anything else they want to add. Doug says agreed. And I think it was to maybe the chat. But yeah, go ahead, please.
I really appreciated the just the environment and the conversation, and the acknowledgement that there is no one right way, because especially, I can get wrapped up in perfectionism, and so like just being in a community of people that give great feedback when I'm here, like acknowledging the curiosity, just coming with curiosity. Everybody's coming with curiosity and offering information, and I appreciated it.
Cara, you and Joel resonated something for me, which I value so much in terms of our experience, is that it's really helpful for me as somebody who practices MI to not be alone in that practice. Being able to be with other people who are thinking about MI, who are practicing MI, it really is quite fulfilling, and it makes me feel like I'm not alone in this. So both you and Joel really made me think of that.
One thing that comes to mind for me is, I've been following you now for a good number of years, so I'm not a stalker. I'm just saying, I tell my students, you gotta find Paul Warren and you gotta find Diane. They're on the East Coast, and but aside from that, one of the things that this particular meeting gave me, because I was looking forward to this for a couple of weeks, was the fact that I felt hopeless to a degree with our current administration and all the monies that are sort of being diverted elsewhere. And this gives me a sense of hope and promise that no matter what, that we still move forward. And that was, I'm not getting emotional, but that's what it reminded me of. And it just gave me a little bit sense of, we can keep doing this regardless of what's going on out there. So I'll just stop there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Orlando. Thank you. Thank you. Chelsea, Lindsay, is there anything you'd like to say before we conclude? Because I think we're at time. Is there anything that either of you need to say or anything you'd like to say?
You missed my feedback. It said I can't do these hearts. Heart.
Oh, this?
Yeah, I suck at that. My 16-year-old makes fun of me all the time. Okay. Thank you everyone so much for being here. Chelsea put in the chat, if you could complete the post survey as well as the GIPRA survey, that really helps us with being able to collect data. Paul, I do heart you. Thank you so much for being here. This has been awesome.
Thank you.
Chelsea,
It's
do you have
really,
anything? Yeah, oh, sorry.
yeah. Chelsea, anything you want to add?
No, that's it. Just thank you so much, Paul, for taking time to be here with us today. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining and for staying the whole time. It was good to see you all.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody. Take good care.
Thank you.
The slides that you're going to send out, was that going to come to us automatically?
Yeah. Chelsea and Lindsay have those, Joel, and they'll be distributed to everybody who attended.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Of course, you'll get a follow-up email with your slides and your certificate within the next week or so. So keep an eye out for that. And if you don't get it, feel free to reach out to us at the ATTC and we'll make sure we get that sent over.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Lindsay and Chelsea, you'll let me know if there's anything you need to follow up with me about. So, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I'll reach out to you soon, Paul, if there's anything on our end. But feel free to reach out to me too if you have any issues getting invoices in or anything like that.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you both so much.
Yeah, have a good week, Paul.
I miss
All right.
you, Paul. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye,
so long.
everybody.